Today, we're doing something really incredible. We are stepping aboard a literal floating fortress. We're going to take a deep look at the 26-year-old German warship, the frigate Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. For 6 grueling months, this vessel and its crew of around 240 men and women live, work, and if push comes to shove, fight at sea. They are out there right now on a highly critical NATO mission in the Baltic Sea, acting as the absolute sharp end of the spear for global security. It's this fascinating, intense world of high-tech weaponry, macro geopolitics, and just everyday, gritty human endurance.
Okay, let's dive into this roadmap and see what we've got today. We'll start with NATO's Baltic Sea frontline, then explore the frigate's arsenal and eyes in the sky, and finally, we'll wrap up with daily life below deck and real-world emergencies and alliances.
All right, part 1, NATO's Baltic Sea frontline. So the Baltic Sea has become this highly volatile geopolitical hotspot. In fact, it's functioning right now as the central stage for what a lot of people refer to as a new Cold War between East and West. To really understand the stakes here, we have to look at the geography. With Sweden and Finland recently joining NATO, the alliance definitely dominates the North Atlantic and Baltic region. But Russian naval fleets are also highly active in these exact same waters, demonstrating their own combat readiness. Incidents triggered by hybrid warfare are definitely on the rise, so the frigate's mission here is twofold: to strongly project a physical presence and to train for emergencies amidst this constant, high-stakes tension. Now, you might hear the acronym VJTF being tossed around. It stands for the Very High Readiness Joint Task Force. And the Mecklenburg-Vorpommern isn't just out there participating in these waters, she is actively serving as the flagship, leading NATO's Rapid Maritime Reaction Force in the Northeast Atlantic and the Baltic Seas. If a crisis erupts anywhere, this ship is part of the immediate frontline response capability to assert the alliance's defense.
Moving right along to part 2, the frigate's arsenal. Let's transition away from the strategic, geopolitical mission for a second and talk about the sheer physical reality and the staggering scale of the ship itself. I mean, to move 139 meters and thousands of tons of steel through the water, you need massive, massive power. The ship's combined diesel and gas turbine propulsion system generates a staggering 3 megawatts of power. Just to put that into perspective for you, if you routed that electricity to an entire coastal city, you could literally power all of its street lighting and standard household consumption. It is wild.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how well-equipped this ship really is, because all that power perfectly supports an incredible variety of weaponry. On one extreme, you have these devastating long-range capabilities, like the Harpoon missiles packing 220-kilogram warheads, that can strike ships 220 kilometers away. Then, on the other end, you have these rapid, close-quarters defense mechanisms like the 4 permanently mounted 12.7mm machine guns used against approaching speedboats. Right in the middle is the ship's workhorse, an Italian 76mm main gun that fires 85 rounds a minute at speeds approaching 1,000 kilometers per hour.
Section 3, Eyes in the Sky.
You know, modern naval warfare is incredibly three-dimensional. It's not just about what's on the surface anymore. The crew is constantly monitoring below the water, on the surface, and way up in the air. To maintain this 3D view, the German Navy utilizes contrasting aircraft. First, you have the massive land-based P-3C Orion aircraft. Powered by 4 turboprops, it acts as this long-range eye, monitoring wide-ranging sea areas and beaming data back to NATO command. But directly on board the frigate itself, you have these agile helicopters, like the Sea Lynx, and increasingly the ultra-modern NH-90 Sea Lion. These act as the frigate's direct tactical arm, capable of covering a 100 nautical mile radar radius, transporting personnel, and even hunting submarines. But here's the real so what of it all. What are these eyes actually looking for? Well, they aren't just scanning for enemy ships. The crucial point here is the protection of the very infrastructure that powers our everyday lives. They are vigilantly monitoring submarine pipelines, underwater internet cables, offshore wind farms, and ocean oil rigs from potential sabotage. They are quite literally out there protecting the invisible lifelines of the modern world. And out there on patrol, it can turn into a bit of a cat-and-mouse game. Encounters with the Russian military are frequent. Russian Su-27 interceptors will regularly approach the P-3C Orions and fly alongside them for 5 to 10 minutes before just peeling away. They also frequently track Kilo-class fighter submarines cruising the Baltic. Now, it's really important to note that the military explicitly treats these intercepts as safe, professional, and entirely routine procedures. It's exactly what NATO forces do when unidentified aircraft approach their own airspace.
All right, part 4, Daily Life Below Deck. Let's drop below deck for a minute and look at the gritty, relatable, everyday human routines happening deep inside the belly of the ship. Because the truth is, a warship literally never sleeps. The ship's bridge and its high-tech operations room have to be manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without fail. To pull it off, they use a 3-watch system. The shifts just bounce back and forth throughout the day and night. This ensures that the crew remains sharp, constantly monitoring radars, electronic nautical charts, and engine systems. Now, keeping a massive machine like this moving takes a ridiculous amount of fuel. When the ship's gas turbines are running at full load, they can guzzle 100 liters of diesel in just 45 seconds. But fueling the ship's mechanical heart sets up this fascinating contrast with an equally daunting task, fueling the 240 hungry human beings on board. And that brings us to the galley. Preparing breakfast, lunch, and dinner while constantly battling the elements and tricky supply chains is no joke. As one of the cooks humorously pointed out, sometimes the real problem is that you just can't source the right cheese in every port, and you simply have to make do. But the job is completely serious. You absolutely cannot fight on an empty stomach. And cooking for over 200 people gets incredibly complicated when the ship is being tossed around by 10-meter-high waves and pots and pans are flying completely across the kitchen. You really can't underestimate how much food impacts morale during a grueling 6-month deployment. Food acts as the glue holding the crew together. The ship actually features its own pastry operation, baking fresh bread from scratch every single night. The absolute highlight of the week, Sailor Sunday, which, ironically enough, falls on Thursdays. The galley bakes a spectacular mocha cake, entirely from scratch, layered with chocolate, bananas, and cream. It's a small touch of home, but it provides a massive boost to the crew's spirits. Let's move to part 5 and see how this builds up. Emergencies and alliances. This is where all that training, teamwork, and daily grit really pays off when real-world challenges arise. Being independent of ports is absolutely essential for a warship, and that requires a fascinating high-wire act, open sea refueling with an allied ship. Imagine aligning 2 massive ships side by side while still in motion, firing a line across the choppy waves, and physically dragging over a heavy fuel nozzle. The crew coordinates this whole dance using color-coded helmets to identify roles, transferring around 80,000 liters of fuel in minutes. It brilliantly illustrates the intense international teamwork required to keep the ship operational. Of course, sometimes the emergencies are tragic and completely unscripted. During this particular deployment, the frigate received a distress call from a passenger ferry, the Stainless Spirit. A mother and her 7-year-old son had gone overboard into the freezing Baltic Sea. In a matter of minutes, the NATO unit completely dropped its military exercises and switched directly into rescue mode, instantly offering assistance to the Swedish Rescue Center. Dropping all the technical jargon for a second, you can imagine the heavy emotional toll this took on the sailors. This became deeply personal for the crew, many of whom are parents themselves. Despite the crew doing absolutely everything they could and rapidly transporting the victims via helicopter to a Swedish hospital, they learned the heartbreaking news the next day that the mother and son tragically did not survive. It is a very somber reminder of just how unforgiving the sea can be. Now, to handle any medical emergencies for its own crew, the ship essentially functions as an independent floating city. It's equipped with a dedicated ship's hospital, a pharmacy, and emergency surgical equipment that can be activated if specialists are flown in. It even features an onboard dentist. They brought in an Army soldier specifically for this deployment, and he keeps morale up by joking with patients while providing full dental checkups for the entire international fleet. Ultimately, what makes a deployment like this so impactful is the incredible teamwork across nations. Allied navies aren't just doing occasional joint exercises anymore, they are running continuous operations. French, German, Polish, and Swedish forces speak a common procedural language and function together as one cohesive unit from morning to night. In a world that has definitely grown less secure, the true strength of NATO lies in this shared multinational camaraderie out there on the water. So the crucial point is this. We've seen how the macro geopolitics of the Baltic region dictate the micro realities of 240 sailors relying on each other and their international allies every single day. As geopolitical priorities continue to shift in this volatile new era, what will be the defining role of integrated naval defense in our future? It's a huge question, and one that leaves us eager to see how these floating fortresses will continue to shape global security.